everybody is ready, then we can start again. The last lecture for the day. So we'll now discuss the 6 trumpets from chapter 8 till 11. So I've now discussed chapter 6. And now we'll jump to chapter 8 to 11. At this stage I'm not really discussing the particular details, for example, the 144,000 or the martyrs coming from the Great Tribulation, which is both depicted in chapter 7, as well as the other things that's depicted throughout the book. I'm just focusing on the structure of the book. So I'm focusing now on the 6 trumpets. We suggest that these trumpets have reference to a war against Jerusalem. Okay, so I suggest that these trumpets have reference to a war against Jerusalem. It's a war against Jerusalem that is depicted here. So keep this in mind. This is what I suggest. Why do you suggest it? Marie-Louise, why would you think would I suggest something like this? What would be my most basic, before even going into the book, why do you think would I think in these terms? Why would I think that the trumpets refer to a war against Jerusalem?
Which trumpets do you mean?
The 6 trumpets, the first 6 trumpets that we're going to discuss right now, chapter 8.
Yeah. Well, because that is coming, the desolation itself. You know
Abomination of desolation?
No, that's
But the? I'm not sure, I don't understand sign language, it's not that, actually. Try again. Destruction, yeah, of Jerusalem.
No, it doesn't make sense to me.
Doesn't make sense to you. Okay.
So,
Okay, Jacomine, why would you say, do I think that the trumpets, the first 6 trumpets, refer to a war against Jerusalem? What would you say? Why do I think in those terms?
Maybe because of Daniel 9:7 is written about
What's there?
Israel.
So in the middle of the week, there will be a war against Jerusalem, the destruction, the abomination of desolation. And Jerusalem has been taken in the past when that happened by Antiochus IV. So maybe in future the same thing will happen. Maybe that's true. What do you think, Micha? What is your opinion? Why do you think so? What am I doing in Revelation when discussing Revelation? I'm doing something. Thus far, from the moment I started this chapter 6, I did something. Why would I say that these 6 trumpets have a reference to a war against Jerusalem? What would you think?
It's a bit hard for me to explain that.
But try some explanation. What do you think? Do you have an idea or no idea? Okay. Anybody else? Why? Before you, anybody else that want to try? Okay, here.
I think because in every prophecy in the Bible, also in the Old Testament, but also the New, Israel has an important place.
Exactly. So this is a good point. Proceed.
And therefore Jerusalem, it's the place, it's the city of God.
Okay, so Jerusalem features in the prophecy, yeah? But why would I say that this refers to the war against Jerusalem? Sabine?
Do you refer maybe to Daniel? Because you said it several times in Daniel the prophecies for Israel.
That's right. So what he is saying is the prophecies of Daniel, we read, for example, in Daniel 9, I think that's, you've referred to Daniel 9, that these prophecies concerns the people of Israel and the city of Jerusalem. Now he's saying that in Revelation, remember that Revelation is just reworking the prophecies of Daniel, so it must concern Israel and the city of Jerusalem. But my question is, why the war against Jerusalem? Why do I start there with the trumpets?
Jesus also says like that everyone will be against Jerusalem.
Yeah, close. That's true. But why do I start here? Because what you're referring to is something general. Why do I think that this is exactly this war that is referred to by the 6 trumpets? Yes, Micha.
Maybe Jerusalem is also an image of the shades of God.
Maybe. But what I'm doing is I'm comparing the prophetic discourse with Revelation. So what I think is, the way I present it, is that what Jesus said in the prophetic discourse, he is just referring to again in the book of Revelation. We've already seen that the first part of Revelation, these seals, all of these first seals agrees with the prophetic discourse with the first part, the general part. So the general part, the first 6 seals, which are general things that will occur on the world event, and have special reference also to end time events when these general things come to a climax. After that, in the prophetic discourse, after Jesus gave these general predictions about what would happen, he comes to verse 15, and then he starts with the particular details of certain things that will happen at the end of days. And with what does Jesus start in verse 15? What does he say? What should you look out for? When he starts to describe particular things, a certain thing, he says there's something that will happen. He says the desolation of Jerusalem, of abomination of desolation. When you see that, you should know that the end is near, and then certain things would happen. So Jesus starts with this war against Jerusalem. Maybe we can just read it in St. Luke's version. Somebody can maybe read Matthew's version, and somebody can read Luke's version. Who will read Matthew's version? That's verse 15. Who will read that for me? Okay, Marlies. And who would read Luke's version? The same point in St. Luke.
Where's the Luke?
You'll just have to look which verse it is.
21 verse 15 or 14.
It's in chapter 21. Say again. No, it's not 24. Earlier. Say again.
21:20 is the start.
20. Yeah, it starts. Verse 20. So verse 20 in Luke 21 agrees with verse 15 in Matthew 24. Okay, so who is going to read Matthew 24 verse 15? Okay, proceed, Mari, Louise.
Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand.
Yeah, so now Jesus is referring to a particular event that will happen in future in accordance with the prophecy by Daniel the prophet. And he refers to the abomination of desolation. Now historically, when that happened, desolation can also refer to destruction. I've told you that. But in the middle of the final 7 weeks, historically, on the August the 4th, he took Jerusalem. And when he took Jerusalem, he conquered Jerusalem. In the temple, he placed this image of Zeus Olympus. The abomination of desolation referred to. So we think in terms of future events that the Antichrist will do the same. We've seen St. Paul says he will sit in the temple as God, but that will happen only after he conquers Jerusalem. So who will read Luke 21 verse 20?
Times, like with the Zeus Olympus, picture of Caesar.
Exactly. So the first time that something like this happened was in the time of Antiochus the 4th. That was in the year 167 BC. The next time that something like this happened was in 70 AD, when the Romans, that was when the Seleucids, the Syrians, conquered Jerusalem. The second time it happened was when Titus conquered Jerusalem, and we placed an image or a large banner with the image of the Caesar on it in the temple. And then the third time, in prophetic context, where it still lies in future, is when the Antichrist himself will sit in the temple as God, as the great Caesar of his time. And that's still in future. Who are going to read Luke 21, verse 20? And remember, it's the same thing that Matthew refers to in verse 15, but Luke gave a different way of reading that very same prophetic discourse. What did he say?
That when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies,
Proceed.
then know that its desolation is near.
Yeah, so he again refers to the desolation, but now he says when Jerusalem is surrounded by armies, then you must know that its desolation is near. Now if you compare the two versions, Matthew's version and Luke's version, this is the same point in the same discussion. So Jerusalem will be encircled by nations and it will be taken in the middle of the final 7 years, and then it will be desolate, and that's when the abomination will happen. So that's the same event. So what I'm saying is the following. After Jesus gave a general discussion of things that will happen in end times, it comes to particular events. And the event that he starts with, when he discusses the end time events, is the war against Jerusalem.
It is already fulfilled.
No, the one. If you read Luke's version, it's fulfilled, but if you read Matthew's version, it lies in future, and it's the same event. So we're also talking about the war against Jerusalem, although Matthew doesn't spell it out so clearly. You see what I'm saying? Therefore, since I think and believe that we should read Revelation in the same context than the prophetic discourse, I believe that the trumpets refer to exactly this event, war against Jerusalem. Okay, so let's go. So the first, just to give you a background idea in your head, when we move through it, you'll see why. The first 6 trumpets and Ezekiel's prophecy. So let's compare. I've said that there's very little in Revelation that's not in the rest of the Bible. So, the trumpets and Ezekiel's prophecy. Both prophets see God's glory. That's in the first part of Ezekiel 1 to 10. Both prophets see God's glory and how his decisions and accompanying heavenly events impact on earthly events. Both see the same thing. They see God's glory and his decisions and how that heavenly events impact on earthly events. So, St. John, he sees these prophecies of things happening in heaven. The trumpets that is blown, the scales, the vials, and so on. It's things that happen in heaven. But it refers to earthly events because it impacts the earth in some way. The trees, the rivers, the sea, everything is damaged. It impacts the earth. Both see how an angel takes fire from the heavenly altar or from between the cherubim and throw it on the earth in both cases. You find that in Revelation 8, just after the 7th seal was broken, and just before the first trumpet is blown, while just after the silence in heaven, half an hour silence, and we find that the angel takes fire from the heavenly altar and he throws it on the earth. And that's exactly what Ezekiel saw, how fire was taken from between the cherubim under the throne of God and thrown on earth. Both see how God sends an angel who seals the servants of God on their foreheads against his wrath. Both see that. Ezekiel see God sends an angel. You can read it in Ezekiel 9. And that what that angel did was to seal certain persons on their foreheads that God's wrath will not, that they will not participate in God's wrath. And, say again, you with me? And this is the same what we see in Revelation, in chapter 7, where the 144,000 is depicted. They sealed that God's wrath will not damage them in any way. They will not experience the wrath of God because they sealed in such a manner that they of in some way God keeps them from it. Both see how the godless are killed by the angels. The godless are killed, or by the plagues. The plagues or the angels killed these, although these merely reflect decisions in the council of God. It's merely decisions in the council of God. Both sees 6 angels who execute God's wrath. Both sees that. In the case of Ezekiel, he sees 6 angels that execute God's wrath, through which the people is killed. In the Revelation, the same happens. We find the six angels that blow the trumpets, and they contain the wrath or the plagues. Both receive a book full of woes that they had to eat. Ezekiel had to eat such a book, which was bitter in his mouth, sweet in his mouth and bitter in his stomach. And in the book of Revelation chapter 10, we read how St. John also receives a book from the angel, and he also had to eat it, and it was also very much the same. Both proclaimed directly after eating the book, in both cases, that Jerusalem would be trampled underfoot by the heathen. Both says the same thing. We read it in Revelation chapter 11 verse 1, and we read it in Ezekiel chapter 4 verse 2. Just after they ate the book, which is actually the prophecy, this book, this little book that they ate, refers to those things that they're going to prophesy about. Just after that, both refers and prophecies about Jerusalem that would be trampled underfoot by the heathen. Trampled underfoot by the heathen. Both hear that a third of the people will die. A third. Ezekiel hears that a third of the people will die. In his case, the prophecy is only concerning Jerusalem. But we find the sign in Revelation that a third, everything you've seen earlier, I've said, when the first six trumpets is blown, when they're blown, they damage a lot of things, but it's always a third that is damaged, and eventually a third of the people also dies when the 6th trumpet is blown. This seems to me that the agreement between the prophecies of Ezekiel in chapters 1 to 10 and Revelation in the first part, especially chapters 8 to 11, that they are concerned with the same events, which is the conquest of Jerusalem. Do I have your attention? It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, can you go one slide back? Slide?
So, now you read Ezekiel with different eyes. You remember what I told you about Revelation? Very little new in Revelation. It's just reworking things from all the prophets in the Bible, nearly all of them, that refer to these end time events. He used it from them, certain aspects. The basic outline, he takes from the prophetic discourse, from the prophetic rede. Then, particular aspects. When he refers to the war against Jerusalem, when he speaks about when the first 6 trumpets is depicted, he takes it from Ezekiel. He just takes it exactly from Ezekiel, he just reworks it slightly in a little bit. But for the most part, it's the same things that happened. You happy? No problems. Judith? You're taking the place of the archangel. Michael. So when you sit there, you should think. You should do what he normally does when he sits there. He thinks. Okay, I'm just joking. All of you has good minds. I like it. You think about it. Good arguments and everything. So the 6 trumpets and Ezekiel's prophecy. Now I come to the same first trumpets and I discuss it in the light of the prophecies of Joel. Now we move to another Old Testament prophet, namely Joel. We've already now done Ezekiel, now we do Joel. There's a remarkable agreement between the six trumpets and Joel's plagues, especially insofar as invading armies are depicted as a plague of locusts in both cases. So I know you won't have the time at this stage to go and read Ezekiel chapter 1 to 10, as well as Joel chapters 1 to 3. It's just too much work to go and read everything. But that's why I gave you the book to read, in which I discuss this in quite some detail in my book. And I present it in this way, and I hope later on, when you reread it, you will spend time and go through all these things carefully.
Oh, a locust is like a grasshopper.
A locust is a grasshopper,
Yeah.
springaan.
What is invaders?
Invaders, that's conquering armies. They invade the country. Hulle val dit binnenvallende. Can the Dutch people understand binnenvallende? Binnenvallende weermacht? But not the Germans, they won't understand that. They're excluded. Yeah. So there's a remarkable agreement between the 6 trumpets and Joel's plagues, especially insofar as invading armies are depicted, symbolized by a plague of locusts. Trees, grass, rivers are damaged in both cases. Blood, there's reference to blood in both cases. And quite a lot. You can go and read it. The sun, moon, and stars are darkened in both cases. The invaders are depicted as locusts in both cases. In fact, in both cases, they look like horses. In both cases, they have teeth like lions. In both cases, they come, maybe not in both cases. Yeah, in both cases. They come from the north. Okay. So they look like horses, they have teeth like lions, and Revelation 9 verse 3 look like horses. Yeah. And their approach is compared with the noise of chariots, war chariots. Say again?
I was just reading, but in Revelation it's not that they come from the north.
Yeah, I know that. You're correct. I just mention it because it's in the other prophecy, it's not in Revelation. But you're correct. When I saw it, yeah, I immediately see that. But the reason why I added it was to draw your attention that in the other prophecy it's mentioned that they came from the north. I now remember where I got it, why I put it in. Okay. Sharp. Good. Sun, moon, and stars darkened. Invaders depicted as locusts. They look like horses. They have teeth like lions. In both prophecies, they depicted in this way. Their approach is compared with the noise of many chariots. War chariots. In ancient times, they had chariots. And the king was sitting on this chariot, made of iron. And there was enormous noise when hundreds of these war chariots were driving through the fields towards the enemy. It sounds like an enormous noise, a noise of war. So this is what he hears, the noise of chariots, the noise of war. In both cases, we find that. Refer to. The approach is compared with the noise of chariots. The events seem to end, in both cases, with the Battle of Armageddon. Although this name is not used in Joel, because this is the only place in the Bible where this name is used. But the events depicted in Joel, chapter 3, verse 12, etc., seems to refer to the end time events that will happen during the battle, the great battle of Armageddon, which we will discuss on Tuesday, Lord willing. So the reason why St. John, the Lord reveals these things to St. John within these terms, using these symbols, is because it's also found in Joel. The prophecies should always be viewed as synchronizing with each other, as using the same images, one building upon the other, reworking it. St. John he could maybe have used totally different images, but that's not the way God proceeds in revealing the prophecies. The agreement suggests that both prophecies depict an army that comes against Jerusalem. Okay. Gedo, you happy? Are you happy? You're not sure? Am I going too fast now? I think what is a little bit difficult is I'm using a lot of material from Joel and from Ezekiel, That I have not discussed previously. But bear with me and you'll have to go and read it on your own, because in my book I have a full discussion of this. If you read the book, if you read the chapters, you'll have a detailed discussion and it'll help you a lot. That's why I told you to read it for today. Have you read it, Judith? You've read it? Does it help you? The fact that you've already read it? It helps a lot, yeah. And Jan, do you read it? That's why you should read it. Okay. So let's proceed. The feast's first 6 trumpets as depicting a war against Jerusalem. Now I'm taking it serious. So now I'm really thinking in these terms, that these 6 trumpets depicts a war against Jerusalem. The first trumpet, hail and fire mixed with blood. This is what is depicted. Maybe it refers to gunfire and the spilling of blood, where the hail and the fire is a symbol used for something like gunfire. Okay, and the spilling of blood. The second trumpet, a great mountain burning with fire cast into the sea. Great mountain burning with fire cast into the sea, and then the sea became blood. Terrible. Maybe this is what he has in mind. Remember, we're talking about a war. There can't be doubt at this stage that the war is what is depicted here.
But sea became blood. Where do you see the nuclear explosion?
Well, if this happened in the sea, then everything in that total area is dead and it's blood, it's red. I can assure you that.
It's just gone.
It'll die. That which is not gone will die. So where the explosion happens, directly at its epicenter, everything will be gone. But a little bit further from there, if you move outwards, you'll just see dead things, dead fish, everything will be died. It will just be red with blood. I'm just making a proposal.
Yeah. Everything.
Terrible. What do you think, Jan?
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay. Second trumpet, the great mountain burning with fire cast into the sea. Maybe you see the question mark. We don't know what it will be like. We're just guessing. We don't know. It hasn't happened as yet. Third trumpet, the water becomes wormwood in the English. Wormwood. It means bitter. Bitter. This may refer, and the people die thereof, this may refer to radiation. Bitter. The water becomes bitter. So if you drink it, you die. Radiation. Nuclear explosion, you have radiation. Chernobyl. You remember Chernobyl? In the Ukraine, in the north? There's some radiation from there. That was why it's so dangerous, because at that stage, when that explosion happened, with that nuclear reactor, there was a large cloud of radiation that came across towards Europe. You remember that times? And everybody was in a fright. Yes, because when that comes down, you die. Radiation. I worked close to a radiation plant at some stage, a nuclear plant. I remember, I'm a physicist. And some of the people that worked there in later years got cancer, quite a few of them. They got cancer. And most likely because of the radiation. Some of my good friends. Okay. The fourth trumpet, sun, moon and stars become dark. If this happens, and it's a large enough explosion, then due to the pollution of the atmosphere, everything will in fact become dark. So we're consistent. We use the same image throughout. We think in terms of a nuclear explosion. Maybe in the time of the end, it will be something totally different.
It will be what?
Something totally different. Let's say the second coming is in 2,000 years. Maybe we'll have something totally different. But let's say it's in 50 years. It can be quite well. It's quite possible that this is what it will be like. That what's being referred to will, in fact, depict these things. Sabine, are you happy?
No.
That German mind doesn't. It's inquiring mind. You're not happy. You disagree.
No, I'm not disagreeing. I'm not happy with that.
Oh, you don't like this? Yeah, it's terrible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's terrible. But it will be terrible times. That's exactly the point. It will be terrible, 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 terrible times. The first trumpet, the angel of the bottomless pit, he led the demonic powers who brings armies together. When I say he leads demonic powers, I'm also referring to Revelation 16 verse 14 because this is not explicitly stated yet. But it seems to be implied. So this angel, he brings forth many armies and he leads them. The locusts were like horses prepared unto battle. You see, battle that is depicted. The horses are depicted like prepared, being prepared, having been prepared unto battle. They have breastplates of iron. So I don't think real horses are intended. The horses stands for, or is a symbol of, something else that will happen in the end of times. The sound of their wings, that's of the locusts, which are partially like horses. They are like the sound of many chariots, enormous sound. So maybe something like airplanes, war airplanes, you know, when they come by. You hear that sound? Sound of many chariots. Have you been to a luchtskou, an air show? Who of you have been there? And when that airplanes come close by, they pass close by, it's an enormous sound, isn't it? And if they break the sound barrier, you'll cry.
Sorry.
You'll surely cry. Okay. So, the sound of their wings was like the sound of many chariots, they torment like scorpions, because it seems that they have something in their tails like scorpions, and they torment the people. Maybe a description of warplanes, who knows? The sixth trumpet, horses with red, blue, and yellow breastplates. Their heads were like those of lions. Maybe it's tanks or something, no? Head like a lion, round, and they damage the people with their mouths. Fire, smoke, and brimstone. Have you heard about fire, smoke, and brimstone? Brimstone. Swavel. When do you smell fire, smoke, and brimstone? When you fire a gun. Have you smelled it? You never? Peaceful Germans. They become a peaceful nation. Okay. Sorry, it wasn't intended to be negative. Okay, so their heads were like those of lions, and fire, smoke, and brimstone came from their mouths, and seemingly also their tails. Their tails were like snakes with heads. Snakes with heads. Thanks. I'm just playing a little bit around with the symbol. So John describes these things that he sees in a vision with symbols known to him in the context of the ancient world, and reusing symbols already used by the prophet, especially Joel. He uses the word "were like" 12 times. They were like. What does it mean if you say they were like?
It's not the same.
It's not the same. Yes.
You can't describe it clearly because you don't know it.
I've never seen it. Strange things, these things that he's seeing in this heavenly vision. And he can only use the word like 12 times. It's like a horse, it's like a this, it's like a that. Yeah, he's never seen them. Okay. The symbols may be a picture of modern or future weapons. I don't want to be strict on this or imply this is the only interpretation, but I think this is a logical and quite sensible interpretation. Would you agree with me, Gert? Or would you discard this totally and say you're totally off the wagon? You agree? Maybe I fell off the wagon. Maybe this is something different. But I think if we think in terms of war, this is most likely what we should think about. The second part of the sixth trumpet. Now remember, chapter 11, verse 1 to 14, depicts the second part of the very sixth trumpet. It's not yet the seventh trumpet, it's still the sixth trumpet. Okay, so what do we read in the second part of the sixth trumpet? Jerusalem will be tread underfoot for 42 months by the heathen. Who would like to read it to us? What about Judith? You've got to read what I've asked for. Revelation 11 from verse 1. Okay, read from verse 1 till verse 4.
Then I was given
Just start again.
Then I was given a measuring rod like a staff, and I was told, rise and measure the temple of God and the altar, and those who worship there, but do not measure the court outside the temple. Leave that out, for it is given over to the nations, and they will trample the holy city for 42 months. And I will grant authority to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth.
Okay, we'll come back to those things. What is important at this stage is here we have a very clear and direct reference to the fact that Jerusalem, the holy city, will be trampled under feet for 42 months. That's 3.5 years. They cannot be dealt by the nations which came against Jerusalem. So, we may regard the 6 trumpets as a unity depicting one event. Why? Consecutive depiction. The one follows on the other. Numbering from 1 to 6. So they belong together. A continuous and consecutive impact. Continuous, they continually, the plagues, they're not standing apart. It's something that's happening continually. And they're consecutive, the one follows on the other. The impact on the trees, the grass, the sea, the rivers, the sun, the moon, the stars, and the humans. All of that is damaged or killed. And each time, only 1/3 of the entities were damaged throughout. When we read the first 6 trumpets, what happened after these trumpets were blown, the plagues that followed. So I propose the 6 trumpets, first 6 trumpets, we should see them as one event that is just depicted in such a strange way.
I have a question. So you said before that 6 trumpets are war against Jerusalem?
Perfectly.
Sorry?
Perfectly. This is what I'm saying.
Ah. And then when he's talking about 1/3 is going to be this and this and
Yeah.
this, is it only Israel or Jerusalem, or is it referring to more parts of the world?
This is an open question. Because we've seen in Ezekiel's prophecy, it refers to 1/3 of the people of Jerusalem will die.
Okay.
But it's possible that at this stage, this will be such a great world war that it will involve the whole world, and this will in fact be 1/3 of everything in the world. This might be happening at the end of days. Because remember, the type of technology we're talking about, the type of symbols we're using, it seems to me that at this stage it will involve the whole world.
Because if we are talking about a nuclear thing, that it involves more than one.
Exactly. So the event depicted maybe the future war against Jerusalem. It results in the city being tread underfoot for 42 months, that's 3.5 years. And this would happen in the time before Jesus Christ appears in the Battle of Armageddon, slightly later at the end of that period. Okay. Are you happy?
That's what prophecy.
Can you explain the word Armageddon a bit?
No, I won't, because I'm going to come to it. I'm going to come to it. I'll do that. On Tuesday, Lord willing, we'll come to Armageddon and we'll discuss Armageddon on its own terms. Everything in its time. The wise men said there's a time for everything, and now is not time for Armageddon, to discuss Armageddon. Just say again. What did you say?
I said Ecclesiastic 3,
Yeah, okay. Where does the verse come from? That's true. So are you happy with what I've said? Does it make sense to you?
Are you happy?
Does it make sense? Is it fits? Does it fit? So what I'm saying is just, let's go back. So what Jesus is saying, if you compare Revelation with the prophetic discourse, what we find is the first part of the prophetic discourse. Now we go back quite some distance there. There it is. The first part of the prophetic discourse of the van die profetiese rede, it agrees with the first 6 seals. It's a summary of future events. But it's not just a general summary. In the time of the end, these things will come to a climax. It refers to some real things that will happen in that period. There will be a final Antichrist that will arise. There will be an enormous war that involves Jerusalem. There will be famine, death, and pestilence all over the world. Many will be killed by him. He will kill many people, many Christians especially. They will be martyred because of their faith. We'll see after he took Jerusalem, he will severely persecute not only the Jews, but the Christians. Remember what Antiochus IV did. He took Jerusalem, according to chapter 11, Daniel 11, and there was severe persecution. And the same we read in Daniel chapter 7, when he refers to this little horn that will come at the end of days. What will he do for times and half a time? He will persecute the Christians. There doesn't say Christians, he says the people of God. So this will be the time, what Jesus calls the Great Tribulation. So after a general overview of end time events, which also I've got, the 6th seal is the wrath of God, because we'll come to the wrath of God when we discuss the vials, the 7 vials. This, when we start discussing the detailed end time events, we find a close agreement between the 6 trumpets and Ezekiel's prophecy. And this prophecy concerns the war against Jerusalem. The war by Nebuchadnezzar, when he came against Jerusalem and took the city. Okay, that you know already. We've discussed it. The 6 trumpets, first 6 trumpets, also shows a close agreement with the prophecies of Joel, where the invading armies are depicted by a plague of locusts. Even the same symbols. Not only are the trees, grass, rivers damaged, reference to blood, sun, moon, and stars darkened, and the invaders depicted as locusts. We also read that they look like horses, and they have teeth like lions, very similar to the images used in Revelation in that first part that we're discussing. The approach is always also compared to the noise of chariots, enormous noise. And the end of all this is with the battle of Armageddon. It's not the same thing, but that's where it will end. And then when we discuss the 6 trumpets, first trumpet, hail and fire mixed with blood. I propose that this is just a symbol for warfare, for gunfire. The second trumpet, the great mountain burning with fire, cast into the sea. I mentioned the possibility that this actually is referring to a nuclear explosion. First trumpet, the water become wormwood, that's bitter. It's possible that this may refer to radiation because of this terrible explosion. Maybe not just one explosion. Maybe there will be many such nuclear explosions. It will be a terrible war. It will just be something just too terrible to describe. Fourth trumpet, sun, moon, and stars darkened. Maybe because of the pollution of the atmosphere. Everything goes together. Fifth trumpet, angel of the bottomless pit. We'll discuss him in more detail at a later stage tomorrow. He will lead armies against Jerusalem. They look like locusts. They compared with locusts with heads, and they look like horses. They have breastplates of iron. The sound of their wings is like the sound of many chariots. They torment like scorpions. They have seems to have stings in their tails. And here we read that the horses with red, blue, and yellow breastplates. That is the colors involved. The heads were like those of lions. Fire, smoke, and brimstone comes from their mouths and seemingly also from their tails, which were like snakes with heads, maybe tanks. And St. John uses the word, they were like 12 times. So what we're thinking of, we're proposing. And we also read in the second part of the 6th trumpet that Jerusalem is tread on the foot for 42 months by the nations. Okay. And then I've just said that, you know, the trumpets are consecutive depictions. We find that the consecutive depiction, numbering from 1 to 6, continuous and consecutive impact on all these things. That's damage, and every time it's a third. So I propose it's just referring to a single event. That is the war against Jerusalem. Jesus said, when you see, after giving the general discussion, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by nations, then, when you see the desolation, the abomination of desolation, spoken of by the prophet Daniel, that's the same thing, then you must listen. Then will be the great tribulation, and at the end of that period, the Son of Man will come with the clouds of heaven. Okay, this brings this lecture to an end. So tomorrow, please read what I've told you. You'll make much more out of the lecture, take much more out of the lecture if you read. So I've said, Revelation, you must read everything told, including chapter 18. My book, everything including chapter 18. Chapters 11, 12, and 13 is regarding the book of Daniel. If you really don't have time, you can skip it, but if you read it, I think you'll appreciate it. You'll be in a better position to understand you. And also the essay on the final world empire regarding the 10,000 and horns, where I use the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation. That's what's needed for tomorrow to make the most out of the lecture. Yes.
That's so hard for me to read that article on the internet. That English
Is it difficult?
for me. I cannot read it in English.
Okay, but you try it. So it's very difficult.
Yeah. It takes a lot of energy and I don't get a point.
But if you read it, you'll have a good understanding. It's just when you put everything together, that's at the end of the day what is important. And that's not easy.
You have to understand we're not all doctors.
It's written for anybody to read it. But go and try the other one. Go and try the one that I prescribed for tomorrow.